All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am Andy with Integrity Data Insights, and I help other companies with their reporting and analytics. And I'm super thrilled to have my guest with me today, Allison Dittmer. She is a content strategist and a writer, and just has a super amazing presence on LinkedIn. And looking forward to learning from her today. And so, Allison, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. I'm so excited. This is my first LinkedIn Live. So thanks
Awesome.
everybody for joining. Yeah, this is really, really fun.
Yeah, there's one radio show, I think it's the Ramsey Show, where he says, "Well, I haven't lost a patient yet," or something like that. So I guess I could say the same thing, but yeah, Alice and I crossed paths, I don't know, a couple years ago now, and it's been really fun following your journey and kind of being a fellow, ex-corporate, 9 to 5 person myself. I really
Mhm.
appreciate, you know I love hearing your stories and stuff. So tell us a little bit about your background. So you kind of were like me. You worked at a, big corporation, and then you kind of pivoted to doing your own thing. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. So yeah, I spent 15 years in the corporate 9 to 5 world up until a few years ago. So I think it kind of all started like around 2020. We're all at home. I had
Yeah.
my 2 kids with us. My husband was here. We were both on the phone leading teams, on back-to-back calls. And at that time, our kids were 4 and 2.
Okay.
And I just, I looked at my husband and I was like, I just really don't want to do this anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I really just do not want to like be in this 9 to 5 structure where I have to be, on the phone so
Mhm.
much. Like, I loved the part of managing a team and mentoring. Like, honestly, that's what I miss like about that job.
Right.
But I just felt like there's got to be a different path. Like, there's got to be something different that I can do that plays a little nicer with motherhood, because it
Got
just
it.
it just didn't feel like it was going to be working like long term. And at that point, my oldest was, 4, almost 5. He was going to get to the point of kind of like aging out of like the daycare scenario that we had. So like,
Right.
what were we going to do in the summers? You could hire a nanny, or you could,
Mhm.
schedule all these camps, which is fine. And I know people that do that, and it works really well. But for
Right.
me, I was like, I just don't want to do that. Like, I want to be able to be more present with my kids. So it was
That's
like
amazing.
months. It was like months of like thinking through, like, do I put in my 2 weeks notice? And so I did. And I'll be honest, like at that point, I did not have a clear vision of what was next. Like, at
Right.
that point, I'd been writing on medium.com. So it's a platform that anybody can go to and write. And I was just writing about topics I liked. So self improvement, travel, parenting, career advice. And
Yeah.
it was like a place where I was like building courage, I think, for like
Yeah.
writing line and publishing. And yeah, I just kind of took a time out. And at that point, I did not foresee starting my business yet, and doing SEO writing. But
Were
then
you
I guess, yeah, go ahead.
Were you doing like was your kind of was it were you doing kind of writing and that kind of stuff in your corporate world? Like was it a kind of a similar thing that you were doing, or was it a completely different
So So I wasn't the writer per se, but I had a lot of digital marketing experience. So a lot of it was
okay.
working on websites, and working between like creative teams and IT teams and our brand teams. And occasionally, yeah, like we would be with the creative team and we would be giving some suggestions on what copy should be. It's kind of funny because like I always try to be very mindful, I think, of like how much information I was kind of putting out there, or suggestions, because I always felt like, well, that's not my role. I don't want to step on their toes. And then funny enough,
Right.
here I am and writing content, and wow, like what a difference a few years makes, right?
Yeah. I always you're very talented at whenever your stuff comes up. I mean, it's honest. I'd like, oh, this is going to be good, or it's just
Oh,
I would describe it as very relatable, but it's like informative. It's not like, it's just it's very much like, oh, this is like I don't know, it's like a warm blanket or something. It just feels like this
Oh,
is gonna be this is this is what I
aw.
need at this moment.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, like I think that's important, right? Like I think anytime we're kind of like putting information out there on LinkedIn or other social channels, I think you have to make it helpful, like in some way, right? You've got to like put some takeaway there where somebody can say, oh yeah, like I get something out of that, like after I've read the post, essentially.
Yeah, and tell us about the name, The Organic Freelancer. I love that name. So tell us about how you came up with that or what it means and
Yeah, so when I first came up with that, it was related to the fact of, like I said, like when I first started becoming more active on LinkedIn, it was actually like early 2023. So like I had always had a profile. It was like the
yeah.
typical corporate profile. I
Yeah.
had, my titles there. When I get promoted, I said what my new title was. I was checking out what people were doing, but I wasn't posting and I was not engaging. Like I was not commenting really. And so the organic freelancer, when I was thinking about that, because I wanted to start off like as an SEO writer. So that's really how I marketed myself because of just, like I said, that digital marketing background and understanding SEO. And so for me, like the organic related to organic traffic, I thought was kind of a play to SEO of kind of
Yeah.
where my focus was. Because at that point, I was starting to work with clients who were really wanting to grow their organic traffic. And so by doing that, it came down to content that I was working with them on, whether it was from like their website content or like their
Yeah.
blogs, a lot of their blog content. So that's kind of where the play on or the term organic came from. And then freelancer, like when I first started, that's really kind of how I associated myself with as being a freelancer.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Just a quick story I was telling Allison earlier. Um, I was very much like that. Like I was, I worked a 9 to 5, same kind of thing for like 16 years. And, I had LinkedIn, but I didn't, I'd never posting. No way.
Right.
I would look once in a while and like, but it was very much like I was in my safe kind of corporate bubble and I didn't
Mhm.
think I needed why do I need this thing? So then
Yeah.
when my position ended, I don't remember if I was posting before that or not, but I thought like, how can I do have a little bit of fun with telling people like, hey, I'm looking for my next opportunity. So I did kind of this funny video, had my wife actually film it. I was in the backyard and I was wearing a suit. I'll put the link if I can find it, but I was wearing a suit and I was like trying to be all corporate, like I believe in harmony and synergy. And then I took the jacket off and I was kind of like, do people really talk like that? And
Yeah.
that was, like, still probably the most, like, I don't know, not that it was viral by any means, but, like, it was the most probably attention anything I've ever done has gotten in some company that I just had on, last week on my show, Mike Holmes, shout out to him, but they saw it, like, "Hey, we gotta talk to this guy." I actually got 2 interviews out of that. So I think in some ways that's kind of skewed maybe my view of content on LinkedIn because I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's all I have to do," and it'll, um,
Yeah.
but,
We,
um, but anyways, that was kinda my first, but I was exactly like that where I never posted anything, and then eventually I was like, I gotta I think my brother was like, he's in the corporate world, but in the more, like, financial services, so, like, even more
okay.
like, imagine him wearing 2 he's probably wearing 2 suit coats,
Yeah.
and he's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"Take that
Yeah.
down, get it out of there," but then I'm like, "Hey, I got 2 interviews out of it," so, um
Yeah, no, and it just obviously it was like something that was different, right? And it was a little bit of like injecting humor, which I think that's naturally how you are. Like I think you are a person that like
yeah.
values that and it's easier for you to be funny. So I think, yeah, grab a hold of that and use that in your content. Absolutely. It's like what helps you stand out, I think, with other people.
Yeah, thanks for that. But I don't know, like I did something recently in my drums and data thing. I tell people it's either the best or the worst idea I've ever had. So maybe I take your advice too far and put myself too much out there. But yeah, talk about like so I love your advice on like about being active on the platform. And you said, I think even today you mentioned a post like even if you're not ready to post, engage with other people. Tell us maybe more
Mhm.
about that or what you recommend.
Yeah, so I think there's like two parts to when you start marketing yourself and building a personal brand, whether it's on LinkedIn or any other social platform. I mean, the first is in the content creation, right? So, like having clarity on what it is you want to talk about. And obviously, I think that needs to go back to your business goals and play into like who you are as a person and a business. That's like the first big thing, and I think that's where like a lot of, I have some clients come to me where it's like I have all these ideas but I don't really understand like how to put it together or what's the thing that I need to say. So that's kind of like step number one.
Okay.
And then the other step to that is engagement, like for sure, like that's the big piece that's probably not talked about enough. So like for me
Yeah,
it's
let me look at oh, sorry about that. We actually had
it's
a
a
question that kind of let me put it see if you could see it on the screen. This is like exactly what you're talking about. So I figured I'd pop it up on the screen here. But I think this is right in line with what you're saying. But
Yeah,
so yeah, how
exactly. Like, how do I choose the right topic for content when you're trying to share on social? Like I said, it really kind of goes back to like your goals and also your expertise. So you want to talk about something that you feel really confident about talking about. So you've got
Mhm.
to have some knowledge on the subject matter. And typically, like I go through this whole questionnaire process with clients, kind of digging into that of, what's your why? Like, why are you, doing the business that you're doing? What is
Right.
it in terms of like important topics that are also important to your audience? And then, kind of going through that question and answer process, we get to a really good place of like understanding then from a content perspective, what is it that we should be talking about?
Right, that's really good. And then, like, I love your I think one of the biggest things I've taken away from following you through the years is making meaningful comments on other people's posts, right? Can you talk about that? Because I feel
Yeah.
like that's something that people don't do enough of.
Yeah, yeah, because I have people that come to me and say, "Okay, I know I need to post, but I am not ready to post. Like I'm not
Yeah,
ready to have like the spotlight on me." And so one of the first things I tell them is, "Okay, well just start commenting. Like just start to warm up to the fact of kind of being online and being on LinkedIn." So to me, like just starting to intentionally go to other people's like comment or their post and making
yeah.
a comment that is insightful. And when I say insightful, it's not just like, that's great or love it. Like very good intentions. And I get that, but it doesn't give you anything else to like continue the dialogue. And that's what you want to do. You want to continue the dialogue with someone. So it's really kind of saying like, what did you love about the post? Like what resonated with you? And then like add in a little bit of your own experience, right?
Yeah.
Because I think when you can also share a little bit of something about yourself, that to me is the person posting and I'm reading that comment, I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool, that's interesting, I'm going to click on their profile and I want to learn more, I want to learn more about what they're doing. So there's absolutely like value in being very intentional with the way you're commenting like on other people's posts.
Yeah, I had a great story of this just the other day. This was so cool. It was somebody that I follow, and I happened to comment on some. It wasn't even the person. Oh, actually, it might have been the person that authored the post, but I commented something, and then, and anyways, ended up connecting with them. We had this whole long conversation back and forth. We ended up, talking not necessarily about business, but about drums and music and stuff. But it was, but still, it was like amazing. Like I had never met this guy before in my life, and because I made that comment, it led to this whole really rich conversation, so
Yeah. And that's where it starts, Andy, right? Like that's where it starts. It's like finding something that you can relate to with the other person. And it doesn't have to be even around like your services. Oftentimes, actually, I think some of the best like conversations and relationships, they start off with like nothing to do with your business and
yeah,
talking about like your services, but like a shared hobby or a shared interest. That's why you see a lot of people like in their profiles, some of them actually kind of give a little like taste into their personality
uh-huh,
or what they like to do, or they're a parent or whatever it is, because it's something like outside of like this professional world that you can
right.
then kind of like look at and be like, oh, they're a mom too and they're doing all this, like wonder if they have some of those shared struggles or whatever. And then you kind of start talking that way. So that's great. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's what it's all about. And that's the part that I think we don't always remember when we're on LinkedIn, because we have this perception of like it's this professional platform and we can't get personal. But there are elements to like being a little bit personal so you actually build the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's like good and bad, the most frustrating thing, but sometimes the simplest things you put out there get the most traction. I remember I was like trying to do, as a data guy, I was looking at what posts and what the numbers were. And, there's a guy, Jonah, if he's watching, but I posted a picture of us like taking a walk, like, and that post did like better than a lot of these other ones that I spent hours and hours on. So it's like exciting and frustrating at the same time, because you're kind of like, why? But I think it's that human element. I think people just
Yeah,
crave that
exactly.
authenticity, and that kind of like, I don't know, something relatability. Maybe that's the right. People don't like
Connection.
being sold to, I think, and that's tough for me at times, because like you're putting yourself out there. Obviously, you have to try to make money for your business to support your
Yeah,
family and stuff. So you have
right.
to kind of do that, but it's tough, because I think people, if it gets too salesy, I think it shuts a lot of people out.
Yeah, I know for me, like one of the worst things that happens is when people like send a connection request and then they hit me right off the bat with like, "Hey, and do you want to like
Uh,
actually, have do this service or buy this product?" Or even sometimes like just asking me to take an action right away is off-putting, because I'm like, "I don't know you, we haven't been talking. Like,
yeah.
let's try to have some conversation here. Like, I'd really like to understand more about you before obviously I want to like do these other things." Right.
Right. I think I make that mistake at times. I've gotten better at it, but sometimes it's like I feel like I'm doing the person a favor by getting right to the point, but I think the problem is yeah, you're right. It's like asking somebody to marry you that you don't know, you know.
Yeah, it's a balance, and honestly, I think context is really important. So, like, if you've already been kind of engaging back and forth on posts and making comments, I think you've already kind of like warmed up that relationship. Where it is maybe easier to like ask for an action in the direct messages, maybe a little
Uh-huh.
sooner than later. But I think it's like when you're off the bat, never have engaged with somebody, never have commented on a post, and then right away in the DMs, you're like, "Hey, take this action." And you're kind of like, I know for me, it's just kind of like, wait, who are
Yeah,
you and what do you do? And
yeah,
so like you kind of have to remember like what are your reactions to some of that, and let that help guide then how you need to like be engaging with other people too. I think that's useful and helpful.
that's great. Let's talk. I mean, I know we did talk a little bit about it already, but like organic traffic, and obviously, just to make sure everybody's on the same playing field. I mean, organic means like you're doing it yourself. You're not paying,
Right.
somebody to promote it or whatever. I guess you talk about, if somebody hires you to kind of like, hey, Allison, we want to promote our business, and what's the best,
Mhm.
maybe walk me through some of the steps of how do you think about it, and kind of
Yeah.
how somebody would get started on doing that.
Yeah. So when a client comes to me and they say, "Hey, we want to grow or organic traffic," because we know it's a long-term strategy, we know
Mhm.
it's something worth investing in, because ultimately the goal is to rely less and less on paid advertisement, right? That's why a lot of businesses kind of go that route. It's also an avenue to like further educate your consumers. So it's a way to talk about your product and service and how it's very different than other competing products. And it's a way to give helpful information to folks. So for me, like when that opportunity comes up with a client,
Uh-huh.
there's a few things that we go through. Like we look at audience research, like that's probably number one, right? Because at the end of the day, you want to put content out there that really resonates with the people reading. You want to make sure that it is addressing some kind of like problem or challenge that they're having, because
Yeah.
if you're just kind of going off on a tangent about a subject and yet your audience isn't really struggling with it or it's not top of mind, then you're going to have like a harder time of like attracting, the audience. So I always
Yeah.
kind of like to dig in there first of just realizing like more about the audience, who they are. And then I think is like when you layer in the keyword research. So there is absolutely value to having SEO. SEO is not dead. I know that like it's gone through so much like over the last year and a half. But if anything that I've seen, like it's still super, super important because I mean, the data shows like you go into Google Search Console, I look at my own website, I look at my clients' websites, and we've got blog posts that are outranking the homepage. So, like, there is
Wow.
content that's like attracting people who are searching on certain terms or certain questions on Google, and they're landing on our article and they're engaging, and there's clicks there, and they're finding the information helpful because we're seeing those clicks and engagement. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's definitely like a process of really getting into the research on both sides and then like crafting something very, very helpful and clear for the user.
Yeah, so start with your audience. That's huge, and that's something I like when I redid my website last year. I paid a company to do it, and that was probably the most meaningful thing was that they were asking, what kind of like what how do you want to message yourself and all these things that I hadn't thought of, and it really forced me. And it's a work in progress. I mean, it's one of I think one of the most challenging things though to really truly know the audience and who you're speaking to. It's something I still am and trying to improve every day.
Well, and to your point, like it's an ongoing process. It's not a one and done thing. Like ultimately, you want to always like have some kind of activity like in the week where you're touching base with your audience. So like on the LinkedIn content that I work on with clients, there's a lot of coaching when it comes to, hey, ask your audience what they think. Like, what do they think of
Yeah.
your content? I mean, there's lots of conversations happening where it's like, what's your biggest problem right now, like what's your struggle, right? Like you can ask those questions, and I think you find that like when you ask those questions and you have those conversations, it starts to make it very, very clear for you on what you should be talking about that can actually help them, right? And so it makes
Yeah.
your job easier too in creating content and knowing what to post and knowing what blog posts to write and knowing like what content to put on your website and the phrases that like resonate with them.
Yeah, that's so true. And then I think we touched on this a little bit, but to dig a little bit more, like I think as personally trying to promote my own business and such, I struggle with the balance between like, hey, look at me, everybody pay attention to me versus putting some content out there that's a little bit more, just looking to help people and hopefully it helps them. How do you strike that balance or how do you any thoughts that you have on that? It's a because that's something I still struggle with.
Yeah, you're not alone. I think we all feel that that are creating content. The first thing I would say is remember, like you have a story. You have something very unique to share. You have your own journey. So there is something that you could write today that's going to resonate with somebody. So I think that's important to remember that first, okay? Because I think we can
Uh,
get caught up in, oh my gosh, what if this comes off this way? So just remember, you have something to say and you have something that's going to resonate with somebody else. The other point to that is I do think words are powerful, right? And I think you have to be very cautious of certain words that you use. So like saying things like easy this or I had a 25K month, context is important. So like
mhm,
people who are like really earlier in their journey, it's not easy. It's really hard,
no,
right? Like it's really hard doing this and you're barely maybe able to like get clients to pay the bills. So like a 25K month sounds insane to you. So I
yeah,
think like
yeah,
there's obviously like this importance of really like understanding that we're all like at different journeys and being very mindful, I think, of the words that we're using. And at the end of the day, like be an encourager. I say that it's like if you can do anything like in those posts where you're educating and you're giving a tip, also be an encourager and help motivate somebody else with some of those things that you're saying. And then where relevant, offer the fact that you do these things. You provide this service where somebody can like go to your website and learn more, or you've come up with a free resource that can kind of help them along with where they're at, right? So there's absolutely like this value in giving helpful information so that at one point, like when they're ready,
Right.
they'll remember you. Like they'll remember to come back to you when they need help, you know? But everybody's like at a different place, right? And oftentimes it's not that clear funnel where it's like awareness to
Right.
loyalty or conversion. We move like through that. So just being mindful.
Yeah.
They may come back and visit you many different times. Often they do before they decide like, hey, I want to work with them.
And is it true, like, and I've heard this before, and I think I've experienced it, but I'm sure, like, it's easy to get caught up in, like, the impressions or whatever, like, the number of likes or engagement, but I've
Mhm.
heard it said before that, like, a lot of times there'll be people that you do business with that never have liked anything you've done. They might have seen it, but maybe they never clicked that like button. Is that
Absolutely.
true?
Absolutely. I mean, I have clients and I have past clients who've never interacted with my content, never liked, never loved, never commented. And yet
Wow.
they reach out and they're like, hey, I saw that you were posting on LinkedIn. I want to do this. Is this something you do? Does it sound, interesting? Blah, blah, blah. And that's like where we start the conversation. So yes, like you cannot get discouraged, I think, by not seeing your impression numbers go up or seeing very few likes because people are seeing your content. And especially if you're being consistent and you're posting, on kind of like a regular cadence, whether that's like 3 to 5 times a week, whatever that
Yeah.
is for you, whatever schedule that works, they are seeing it. And I do know clients who've had people like come in from other directions saying, I saw your content, never engaged, but gave them a call or emailed them and said, hey, I'm interested to learn more.
Cool. Well, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
One other quick story, like, I put out I finally, I have, like, Buffer, I think it is, one of the ones that sends out, like, where you can, it's like a Hootsuite where you put your content in there and then you could blast it to a bunch of channels. So I finally hooked up YouTube. I've always had a YouTube channel, but I didn't know, it's, like, tough to know always. So I hooked it up to YouTube for the first time, like, Sunday, we went to Taco Bell and I ordered and an AI thing took my order. So I'm like, "Oh, this is fun." I did a little quick video of it, posted it at like 8 PM, and that was the first time I used like the LinkedIn or the YouTube connector from Buffer to do that. Went to bed and I was like, "What? This can't be right." It was like 500 people, and for me, that's huge. Like, I mean, and like you said, it's all relative because somebody else
Yeah.
but, like, I've never gotten, like, 500 views, like, in that short of a and it was like, I was blown away, but then it's like, it's easy to get a big head, like, "Oh, wow, so it's like, I gotta just be careful, but it is nice when you get those when you
Oh
get
yeah.
that big number once in a while, it's
Yeah.
pretty fun, but it doesn't happen for me too often, but
Well, no, and I think that's great that you like noticed that and kind of like celebrated it. Like that was the point on one of my posts today about imposter syndrome. Like you have to
yeah,
find the silver linings. Like you know this, I know this, like building your own business especially. Like you have to find the silver linings because we're often at home working alone, working remotely, and you've got to like find a way to motivate yourself. And it is in the small things that are happening and like taking the time to celebrate it. So good for you. I'm glad
yeah.
that you noticed that and was like, hey, this is cool.
Well,
Like
it's
I'm excited.
I was happy with it. I don't know, just I mean, it's like once again, it's the simplest thing that literally took me almost no effort at all. Wasn't like I sat there and, edited some video and took forever or played the drums or something ridiculous. It was like just something simple. And
Yeah.
talk real quick about that a little bit more about the imposter syndrome. You said,
Yeah.
I think you posted it today. I mean, a lot of people just they feel intimidated, right? By putting themselves out there.
Yeah, I mean, I can go back to, almost 2 years ago when I started. And I can remember, what my initial fear was? It was, oh my gosh, my whole network for my corporate days is going to see this. And what are they going to think? Are they going to think, what is she doing? She left this corporate job that, like I said, I was a part of for 15 years. I mean, a long time. Like
Yep.
what is she doing? And so like immediately like there's that feeling of judgment that I kind of like had in my head.
Yeah.
um and I think it's common for everybody, But even like starting out, like there's that like initial feeling of like, ooh, who's going to be watching? And I
Yeah.
feel judged. And like there's that overwhelming concern there. And then I think it can continue to pop up, because I think depending on the post, there's sometimes where I was just talking to you. There's a video I'm going to post soon where I was running and I'm,
Yeah.
I'm really kind of winded, but I just was really like in the moment of like
Yeah.
thinking through something and really feeling something. And I'm not going to second guess it. Like I'm going to
No.
post it.
Yeah.
It's not perfect. I've got my
No.
headphones on. You just go through all these things of thinking like things need to look a certain way, or you need to have like this very polished look. And the reality is like, we all deal with that. And I think what makes the difference is just starting to take action. And truth be told, once you get started, it then becomes a habit. And I think once you bake in that habit, it gets easier. And a really great thing kind of happens is you start to recognize people are encouraging you actually. Like
Yeah.
I've actually had comments from people who are seeing my stuff on LinkedIn and they're telling my husband, and then my husband is telling me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Like they're not engaging, but like they
Yeah.
just are so encouraging and happy for me. And that's the thing. I think there's more people actually rooting for you than you even realize. And
Yeah.
that's the part like I think you need to try to focus on a little bit more rather than worrying about like all the judgment, because you have important things to say, you have value to offer, and I think you need to feel encouraged to put it out there.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And like back to your point about the running, I mean, it's actually probably the best thing you could do is to not polish it up, not like it's something about it. I've seen it time and time again. Those authentic things, spur of the moment. Hey, I happen to stream of consciousness. I'm gonna jot this down or something. Sometimes people can sense that and they really gravitate, they pull on to, at least I do. I know I definitely do. So I think you're absolutely right
Yeah.
with that stuff. It's hard, it's easier said than done, though, but
It is. It is. I think it just takes like confidence too, like over time, like you kind of build that a little bit more and more. But yeah, I mean, if you're starting out, it is absolutely like intimidating, but how you kind of push past that is just taking action and going for it. And I
yeah.
think over time that starts to feel easier.
And you said the average, like, you should post how many times a week should someone generally post? Is it
I
recommended?
mean, yeah. So, like in general, I think just to get started, taking action and commenting would be a great first step, right?
Yeah.
Once you kind of move past that and you're feeling good and you've kind of built some courage, then you can kind of start thinking about posting. Generally, when I'm working with clients and we're talking through their social strategy, it's kind of at minimum 3 times a week is what I recommend, because that kind of gets you like in the algorithm with the social platform. There's some consistency that you can start to build with like regularly scheduled posts. So 3 at minimum, but you could
Okay.
go all the way up to, 1 post a day. So I'm almost to 1 post a day, but again, that's not
That's
where I
great.
started. And I genuinely like being on the platform. So it doesn't feel like a chore. Like I'm excited to do it.
Yeah, me too. I go through phases, right? Like, if I'm really busy with client work, there'll be times where I'll neglect it for a long time,
Sure.
and then sometimes when I'm not as busy, I'll really hit it hard. So, like yesterday, I was filling up my queue with, a lot of different things, and one interesting thing we talked about right before we went on too is like reusing content. I thought that was an interesting point, or not reusing, maybe that's the wrong word, but
Repurposing.
getting a lot of different things out of one, like getting multiple posts or whatever out of one kind of
Mhm.
topic. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like we
Absolutely.
were,
Yeah. So, like, for example, when you do a long form piece of content, so I like to write blog posts not only for clients, but I write them for my own website. There's a
yeah,
lot of information from that one long form blog post that you can kind of cut up and then reuse as individual posts on LinkedIn, on other social channels, right?
yeah.
Another like really important thing to do is to pay attention to the type of posts that are doing well, and thinking through different content types. So literally, I had a post that was
Oh
like a
yeah.
text post with an image. And it was all about the 10 different like mistakes that I was seeing done on websites when it came to like content and going into a project and kind of doing a website redesign for their content. So I listed those out, and then I was like, you know what, I'm going to try doing a carousel around this and kind of make some
Yeah, I think I
tweaks
saw.
in additions. And it performed well. I mean, I think it even actually did better than the first one. So there's
Wow.
absolutely like value in looking at your content and what's doing well already, and then also thinking through different forms, whether that's like a text post with an image, a carousel, like I said, a video. Like
Yeah.
there's different things that you can do, right, to kind of bring that back in throughout like your
That's
content calendar.
That's a great point. I need to get into that more because I know, like, I always love those carousel posts. I've never made one of them. I need to look into that. But that's a
Yeah.
great idea because it mixes it up too. Because if you're always
Mhm.
just doing videos, or if you're always, somebody sees it like, "Ah, I know this is probably what I'm gonna get with this." But if you kinda mix it up and surprise them, that's a great point.
Yeah, yeah, because everybody likes to also digest content differently. So when you offer it in video form or you offer it like in text, everybody likes to kind of consume it in different ways. So it's good to think of it that way too, like for your audience.
Alright. One of the last topics I wanna talk about is SEO. I know we talked about a little bit. Y you know, I guess maybe start with the basics. I mean, obviously, I think everybody's heard of it, search engine optimization. I've dabbled with it. I've started dabbling with it slightly now that, I'm in there trying to do some of these blogs, but I'm very
Mhm.
like a much a newbie with it. Maybe just give a kind of a real high level view, and then maybe you can talk about some of the stuff that's been going on with it. But just maybe get us up to speed so we're all, kind of as a beginner's kind of guide to it, or
Yeah.
what is it and why it's important.
Yeah, I mean, SEO is a pretty complex topic, so I'll try to kind of give you a like little snippet.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the main thing when it comes to content is keywords do matter in terms of being able to be like findable on Google, is what I call it. So,
Okay.
like I said, like going back to our conversation about understanding what to write about, like not only do you need to look at the audience and what they care about and what they're having problems with or challenges, but like the keywords that they're searching on through Google. And you can do this using paid tools like SEMrush or Ahrefs. There's also like some free trials that they offer that you can do to check it
And
out.
is this before you're like, just to make sure, is this like, say I'm gonna write, like I just recently wrote something on data quality. Would I kind of do this research before I'm gonna write it? Or is it after I kind
Um,
of already have it written?
No,
Or
I
both?
do it. I kind of like to do it before because I like to have clarity around what matters to my audience. And then how can I essentially like sprinkle in SEO keywords that make
Uh,
sense for those articles that I want to write? Because again,
okay.
like you have to be very cautious, I think, to not get caught up in, oh, I just want traffic, because you can attract traffic with certain keywords, but hey, if it doesn't align to your business goals and it doesn't align to your business in general, like that's not going to be qualified
Yeah.
traffic, right? Those aren't going to be individuals that are truly going to be interested in learning more about what you do or potentially like buying from you in the future. So that's why that's really important to like pay attention to
Okay.
the audience first so that you're really prioritizing the right topics. But yeah, like there's this whole process that you go through with keyword
Wow.
research that kind of gets like layered in. And then
Yeah.
I use personally, I use a tool called Surfer SEO where it helps you like learn how to kind of like layer in secondary keywords along with those primary keywords, which is
Wow. So
helpful.
that's a whole new world to me because I never mess with that. But so, like, back to my example, like for the data quality, what I probably should have done is researched what kind of terms resonate with people. Is that kind of the right way to think about it? Like with data quality
Yeah,
issues,
Well,
is
yeah,
it
you want to kind of like start off with your topics of like, okay, I know this is going to be important for me to write a blog post about this,
okay?
right? Based on maybe some of the things, honestly, Andy, that you're hearing from your customers. So like take the opportunity, and here's just a thought. You could
Yeah,
take the opportunity to like email them after working with them and ask them a little bit of like, how did you feel before working with me? How did you feel after working with me? Is there any other
right,
challenges like going on? Because that kind of gives you some like research insight, and then you can kind of start building your library of content of like, hey, this makes sense for me to talk about this, while like showcasing your
right.
expertise too, and like how you can help. But yeah, start with the audience. That's what I would recommend.
Okay.
Layer in the keyword research from going into some of these tools to do that, to really understand what are people searching on Google. And like I said, I use Surf for SEO to write SEO blog posts.
And what is kind of I mean, is it AI that's kind of disrupting it, or what is kind of the maybe just share a little bit about
Yeah.
why has it been a hot topic, or what are people saying about it that's been kind of why it's been appearing kind of in the headlines lately?
So I think one of the main things, takeaways in terms of like the content impact with SEO is there was a day where you could write very top level content where it was like how to X, right? Like almost like very definitional of like, hey, this just explains what it is. Kind of bland, honestly, but it would get a lot of traffic. Now I think we have AI, more in our faces, and it can do that content. It can write that kind of content.
Uh-huh.
So where we're being challenged, and I think it's a fair challenge, of we need to go beyond the top level. We need to actually talk about more of our experiences, like more of our expertise, more examples that like we're
Okay.
layering into the content of what we do, what we've tried, how it's worked, how it hasn't worked, layering in some of those stories, like those true stories from customers who've like worked with us, or from our own experiences of like, this is what's happened. Like that's what like truly starts to like elevate like your content and really make it like more personalized than some of this like top level content that AI can do. So
Okay, so
that's
is it almost like the market got flooded because it's kind of because the AI content can be, put out there more readily, that it's made some of the search engines ignore it more? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Google's done a few different things with algorithms that's had people very upset, like in terms of like throwing Reddit and Quora discussions like way at the top of the page, which is not
Yeah,
always the most valuable content,
right.
or like true content, like factual content. So I think that's where you have to be really careful, and where people who've been doing SEO way longer than me have so much more to say about that and so much experience with it. But I know kind of coming newer into it and just like reading things and
Yeah,
talking with friends of mine who've been doing this for a long time, it's really like, how can you like elevate the content very, very much past just explaining things at a high level. Like the more you can do that and make it more, very, just specific to kind of like what you do with how you're different than competitors, that's going to be more helpful.
okay. Yeah, and what's your experience so far with AI? Have you been embracing it? I know obviously as a content writer, it's hard to
It's a
probably
tool.
ignore it, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think you should ignore it because it's here, and I mean, it's not going away. So I definitely embrace it as a tool. It's a great research tool, like another set of eyes to kind of help you think through something, or when you're writing content, is there important, points maybe you forgot or you left out? So that kind of thing. I know others, who are starting to use it just as ways to kind of make processes move much more quickly, right? So some people like it for email replies, so that they're not having to think through some of these like more standard emails that they're writing,
Uh-huh.
that they have it ready to go, and they're not taking time on that. So yeah, I definitely think it's something to embrace, but I still very much like see it as a tool, because at the end of the day, like it's just scraping what's already on Google, what's already been said.
Right.
So like some of that truer, like new thinking and new ideas, like we still very much need humans to kind of oversee that, and play a big
Yeah,
part. So yeah, definitely embracing it.
totally
But
agree.
yeah,
Yeah, my biggest use case I've been using it for is for, like, a lot of times with this show and such, when I need to make a post about, like, say I'm gonna have you on, I'll take all the questions and I'll at least have it say, "Hey, help me start it." I always have to edit it. It's never like I just can take it and run with it, but it
yeah,
gives me it does help I think it's really good at summarizing or synthesizing, whatever the word is, of kind of like condensing things, because sometimes I can be
yeah.
long-winded and such like that. So I think it has its place, but yeah, I was just curious your thoughts, because I know it's obviously it's probably affected your industry quite a bit. So, but well, thanks so much. I really appreciate Allison you taking the time to be with us. If people want to learn more and engage with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, the best way is really to send me a DM on LinkedIn because, like I said, I'm there 5 days at least every week, if not more. So, absolutely send me a message there. And then I also send out the Organic Freelancer newsletter every Thursday.
Yeah.
It's got free, content tips. We talk about LinkedIn observations, and I'm very much kind of a mindset person. So, like, I have a whole fill your cup section where I like to talk about things that are like helping me, that are motivating me, because I think that's a big part of growing your business. You have to stay motivated. And that's something I send out every Thursday. So there's a link in my profile if you want to sign up there and get that free every Thursday.
I'm a subscriber. It's worth it. Yeah, everybody, like I said at the beginning, it's you won't regret following Allison's content. She does a great job of putting a
Yeah.
lot of great stuff out there and just really making, I think, the world a brighter place. I mean, it is. It can be dark at times, and I think your content adds a lot of light. So well,
Oh, thank you.
thank you so much for joining me, Allison. I'm glad to be part of your first LinkedIn Live, and
Yeah.
thank you everyone for joining us. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks again.
Thank you.